So I'll share with you some of my coyote knowledge that I've picked up from just staring at this engine and the components that are in it. This engine failed. Number 8, it's a blower motor, yada yada, it was on pump gas. A lot of problems. Okay, cool. It's going back together with Gen 2 stuff because fuck it, we're just gonna keep sending it. So I gotta figure out how to get the Gen 2 stuff in here in such a way that it doesn't try to fail just from me being dumb and going, hey, this goes this way and that goes that way, when it doesn't. The only thing that I can really figure is with the Gen 1 stuff, it doesn't have any kind of like markings or anything other than the piston has an arrow. Okay, and whatever side the arrow is on, it's which side the tangs are going to be on. The bearing tanks themselves are going to be on the same side as the arrow. And that's true with Gen 2 as well. All the Gen 2 left bank, right bank doesn't matter either way. All the bearing tangs are going to be on the arrow side of the piston. Okay, if you need another thing, there's no dots or anything on the Gen 1 rods. So, but on the Gen 2, there is a dot. And it's only in one location on the rod. So, I haven't seen anybody, talk about this dot or whatever. And the only thing that I can figure is it's always on the bearing tang side of the rod. So that would mean that the dot faces the rear of the engine and the arrow faces the front, like that. So don't flip those around. Don't flip the rod around to where the bearing tang's on the wrong side. If you have a Gen 2 motor, this dot goes facing the rear, and a Gen 1 motor is the same type of setup. It doesn't have a stronger rod than it has a weaker rod. It does not have a strong rod, but the bearing tangs still face the same size, arrow or side. So bearing tang, arrow facing forward, you can see it there, and then dot faces the rear. So when you put in your Gen, and I'll get into some other things later, that's really all the things that matter that I found out, because the pistons, they don't have like a different part number. You can see the clean side right here, that usually denotes that was on the intake side. I have been trying to figure out if these valve reliefs are different side to side. I haven't really seen a ton of difference. But if you look at the way this is set up, and then you go to the other side, it's literally like they just took the piston and went like that. But if you do that, then you have the intake valve reliefs here. If you take them like this, now it's the exhaust valve reliefs. So that tells me that you can run the piston on either side as long as this arrow is facing forward. And the rod, I'll tell you that you can run the rod on either side as well, as long as the dot on the Gen 2s is facing to the rear. So, so I can see here, and what I figured out is that this kind of rough wearing on the rod denotes that part of the rod was facing the crank. The smoother side that doesn't have really any wear at all, that's where it's shared with another rod. This side right here. This is the number 8 that came from this engine, from this block, and that's the arrow facing forward. This is the side, or this side was like this, and there was a bunch of aluminum in the cylinder that I got off of the cylinder. I cleaned it up. The bearing tangs are on the right side if you're standing at the back of the engine. It's on the passenger side of the engine is where the bearing tangs go. It doesn't matter which bank you are. They always face that way. See this wear? This piston and rod is the rearmost of these two. These two share a journal on the crank. So this one is going to be facing, is going to be on the crank on this side where all the wear is. If you look at the other side, this engine's got about 50,000 miles and there's not a fucking mark, right? Just machining marks right there, right? See all that wear ring that's come right there. If you look at the crank, you'll see that it's not a smooth machine surface. It's a little bit rough on where the rod rides. So it makes sense that it makes that mark. Now that's just gonna tell you where this particular rod was in the engine it was prior, right? If you're putting Gen 2 rods in a Gen 1 block. So, but I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter which side of this rod faces the crank. Like usually there's a side that faces the crank and there's a side that doesn't, but they're both chamfered. Right there, you can see it. Chamfered on both sides evenly. The bearing sits even in the rod. It doesn't sit offset. And another thing is, well, this is basically a dead giveaway, is, okay, that was riding the crank. The dot faces the rear. Bearing tangs are on this side. So this piston was on the rear of the banks, okay? So we'll just say it was there. This piston and rod. Intake side is clean, arrow facing forward. I know that it was on the right bank because of the machining marks, because of the wear marks from the crank being rough, and the smooth side was facing another rod journal. So it was like this, or another rod face. But if you look on the rod, you see the dot. So in this bank, the dot denotes that this rod itself was facing another rod. Okay. So this bank, the dot was facing the crank. Okay. That doesn't make any sense to me. Usually you want, they make the rod in such a way that one side has to face the crank, the other side has to face the rod. But if you look, left bank versus right bank, dot, dot, the design is the same, both sides. There's no special intricacies or anything. If you flip them, they are different on either side. See this little blurb right here that they put? This side doesn't have it. No dot, no blurb. And this was facing a rod. And that was facing the crank. Same blurb, same everything. So they use one rod and they just say, put them in either bank, it doesn't matter. As long as the dot faces the rear, the arrow faces forward, you're gonna be fine. As far as what I can see, okay? Just make sure to assemble the thing correctly. Arrow facing forward, doesn't matter which bank it goes in. And dot facing rear in Gen 2. Okay, Gen 1, it's just bearing tang location. That's pretty much all I can figure out about these, is it's just that simple. I don't see a whole lot of other differences in here to kind of key in on. I'm trying to just do this right as right as I can with this Gen 2 stuff, and just get it assembled like Ford assembled it. You know, that's really all I'm trying to do, is just trying to make sure that I assemble this thing as intended by Ford. You know, I'm trying to make sure that the rods are on the same side and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not sure at all if it matters one side of the rod or the other. I'm not sure at all. I honestly don't think it does. Because they all are assembled, all 8 pistons and rods are assembled identically. They are all assembled the same. You just don't want to flip the rod backwards. That's all, right? For some reason, they like the bearing tangs on that side. And there's usually some kind of engineered reason for that. I don't know what it is. Like I said, I'm just going to assemble this like Ford intended with some extra ring gap, and we're just going to keep sending it, you know? This is a blower motor, so if it blows up, who cares? You know, just throw another block in it. Maybe forge pistons and rods next time. I just really hope that this helps somebody. And if I'm totally off base and somebody can tell me that I'm off base with some proof, and I'll delete the video. I don't want to lead anybody, you know, down the wrong path or anything. I don't really do this for views or anything. I just do this to try and like help out, because, you know, this stuff, I haven't really been finding any of this stuff. So I just have to come out here and stare at it. Been an engine builder for the last 15 years. You know, call me what I am. I'm a diesel engine rebuilder by trade. Build a lot of Honda engines and LSs and stuff like that on my own. This is my own engine. This is not for a customer or anything like that. So whatever I decide to do with it is at my own gains or defeat or whatever you want to call it. This is my own shit, and I'll build it how I feel I want to at the time that I want to put it together. This thing's gonna get at least some King's bearings. It's got the forged oil pump gear and the crank sprocket, and it's gonna get some ARP head studs with some stock head gaskets, some Gen 2 pistons and rods, and some ring gap. I'm gonna do ring gap top and second ring. Second rings are measuring around 25 thou, so I'm probably not gonna do anything with those. The top rings are really tight. They're at like 10 to 12 thou on the top ring. So those are gonna get pushed out to about probably 23 to 25 thou, somewhere in there on the top ring. And then I'm just gonna assemble it. And we're gonna see what it does. And I can give updates and stuff like that if anybody's interested. I might post some stuff on Instagram about it. I'm not really sure. We'll just judge it by interest. And but I just hope this helps somebody. You know, if they're kind of sitting there scratching their head and they don't really know what they're looking at a whole lot and stuff like that. These are just some of the things that I've noticed, basically. And yeah, if you guys have anything to add, I can make another video about this with some stuff if somebody's, you know, got some more knowledge to it and that kind of thing. Generally, the coyote crowd is not, I haven't seen a lot of guys do like this kind of stuff where we slap stuff together and, you know, you just keep sending it and see what you can do with the stock stuff. So I'm genuinely curious what the stock stuff can hold up to. I think it's fairly strong. I think I have a Honda piston and rod somewhere, but you know, the Honda K series is a fairly stout setup from the factory, and I see a lot of similarities here. I actually see what looks like potentially even more strength with the stock 5-liter stuff. So I don't know what the capabilities of Gen 2 stuff is. You know, I've seen a lot of guys, you know, everybody's seen the Gen 2 blocks that hold 1,000 horsepower and that kind of stuff. And I can almost guarantee you that they're taking the ring gap out to 30 thousandths. They're putting it back together with some good bearings, and they're just sending it. They're doing exactly what this is. And, you know, those, either that or they're running stock motors and it only sees one pass and it doesn't ever see a lot of heat. This is a toy car, so I don't really care what happens with this motor. I just care that it runs right and, you know, it holds together. So I put some Gen 2 stuff in it. It holds together somewhat. Like I said, if it lets go, then it's like, oh, well, I guess we found the limit. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I'm kind of giving the Gen 2 stuff as much as I can give it at this point. I'm giving it as much help that I can give it. I'm just trying to assemble it correctly so I don't make an error, at least like, well, we didn't really figure out what the Gen 2 stuff can do, because there was an error in the way that the motor got put together and that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, not a lot of guys are like LS engine builders where they can sit there, think about the motor, you know, make some intelligent decisions, add ring gap, you know, check stuff out, and run the stock stuff and make the stock stuff make a lot of horsepower. I haven't seen that a lot with the Coyote side of the crowd. I see the Coyote side and the Ford side of the crowd kind of just, you know, it's not giving up. It's you know, it's smart to run a forged block, but I don't think they really know why they're running a forged block. The LS side of the house, when it comes to this kind of stuff, you know, they found out where the stock stuff can live at, and I'm just trying to do the same thing with the Coyote stuff. I'm not saying that I'm like, you know, there's a lot of guys that have taken the stock stuff really far. I just want to see myself how far it can go in a real world scenario with as much help as I can give it. So yeah, anyways, that's kind of a little beyond the scope of really what I intended this video to be. It was just more of what I saw in the Coyote engine, and you know, to help somebody put their stock stuff back together in a semi-intelligent kind of way. Yeah, comment below if you guys have anything to add. I'll read all the comments and everything. I know probably not a lot of people are going to view this video, but hey, if it gets a lot of views, cool. I'm not monetized or anything. I don't really care. Yeah, let me know what you guys think.